4 to 8. The latest annual crime stats confirm what you already thought to be true, and that is that crime is increasing and getting worse. Assaults over the past 12 months has increased by 21%. Domestic violence is up a whopping 26%. In fact, in every single way, every single stat that there is to be compared, crime is worse this year compared with last. There have been a raft of legislative changes to try and address crime in the Northern Territory, including new police powers, which were exercised for the first time this week, and perhaps you were wanted for the first time. Perhaps you had your scissors taken off you, or were you given a cautionary tale. The text number is 0487 99 1057. Michael Murphy is the Northern Territory Police Commissioner. Good morning, and thanks for coming in this morning.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning to your listeners.
Let's start with these financial figures from last year. What is driving these statistics up this year?
A lot of the domestic violence assaults, so when you look at some of those figures, 80% of our workload, that's fairly conservative, is related to serious violence, assaults and the like, and 65% of that is around domestic violence. Alcohol's a huge contributor still, whether it's locally sourced or a secondary supply. So we've got a real focus on the secondary supply from interstate as well. And you've seen in recent times some significant seizures across Central Australia as well, and those efforts will continue.
When you say from interstate, where is it coming from?
Usually Mount Isa or Port Augusta or Whaler. So there's some planning behind it too, with some people within the territory that'll import grog and make some money out of it. So we're keeping an eye on them, and obviously really reliant upon public information and harms, and obviously people in community around Central Australia to provide that information about who's responsible for grog running, because it's a real contributor to harm in the territory and across the Northern Territory and into the islands.
And they're just driving it across the border, are they?
Yeah, when we see 50 casks of wine being seized, it's pretty significant. That's a huge harm contributor. And when we seize that, we see reductions in reports to police across Central Australia region and community, so it does have an impact.
50 casks of wine. What about the rum? That seems to be a very popular staple as well.
Yeah, rum's very popular. Any type of spirit and bourbon, we see seizures of up to 20 bottles at a time heading out to communities across northern, the top part of the Northern Territory as well. And when we seize those, that contributes to, obviously harm reduction. But when we see it actually get in the community, we see lots of fighting and violent fighting and lots of violent conduct where, we saw recently that we need to deploy extra police to arrest a number of people to stem the violence again. So, yeah, it is an ongoing work, and it's an ongoing body of work under the Liquor Act too, and licensing about sales and supply and what that looks like, and working with our partners through the hospitality industry to better control this point of sale and what that looks like, about where grog's going and how much is being sold.
When I spoke to your predecessor, he said that rum was selling for upwards of $500 a bottle. Yeah, how much are you finding the grog is being sold for at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit less now. It was more in demand across the COVID period, where we saw $500 a bottle for a single purchase, but if you wanted to go into syndicate, it was up to $1,000. And it was one styrofoam cup each, basically, that would give you a hit. Significant amount of profit out of that, and that's why we need to go back to the source to see where it's coming from, and better control measures from policing and that engagement, because we do have to remember it's a highly regulated industry, it's a lawful product, but it's about how we control where it goes, because it does contribute to high harm.
Well, anyone who's had too much rum knows that it can turn you into a very different person, and in many cases very violent as well. And we've seen that reflected in these statistics, which are domestic violence up by 27%. And yesterday on this program, you heard from Rachel Umbagang from WYCA in the Northern Territory. She's a regional manager.
ABC ready.
I would see yesterday as a point when we say, this is not all right. We can't stay silent about this. It's just not okay for us to keep doing business as usual. We have to create a change. We need to work with both levels of government and the whole community to really get the message out there that we have got to do something different here.
Rachel Ubugang there, and she spoke about an interagency organisation called ICRO. What role does ICRO play with the police, and is that still unfolding, this relationship?
So the ICRO basically was under Action Plan 1, which has been replaced by the Domestic and Family Violence and Sexual Violence Reduction Action Plan 2, recently announced by Minister Warden. Basically, it's an investment I think there's about $20 million and I think another $46 million in the programs. It's about changing the direction about domestic violence, what it looks like, not just in the territory, but nationally as well. So we'll see programs in jails, men's change behaviour programs, a firmer focus on victims, police changing their thinking about how we respond. Like, we do respond to a lot of jobs, but we need to do the prevention work and the engagement. And I think, as she just said, that it's pretty far-reaching domestic violence, and it's time to shine a light on it and actually start getting to the root cause of why this is occurring so we can prevent things from happening. So that action plan too is a big investment around what that looks like, victim focused. It's going to be a co-responder model, and there's going to be a pilot project in Alice Springs that's being worked up now. We've changed our position, so we've got an assistant commissioner for domestic violence and youth now who's doing a body of work about establishing what a response for prevention, engagement and better policing services for victim and offender management, high harm targeting, and all those things that we need to work and think differently, not just as a police force, but across the whole of government and into the Commonwealth space as well, and even lobby for more funding around demands-based. We see high rates of domestic violence in the territory, disproportionate to any other jurisdiction. So our funding model needs to change, and I know there's been some discussions, and I've been talking obviously with our fellow commissioners about what that looks like into the future. So it is a national issue, and it's time that we change our thinking about how we do things differently to make an impact.
Well, you say we need to shine a light on domestic violence, but as you've articulated, putting money into it is far better than shining a light on it. And the sector itself asked for what they say is a conservative $180 million to address domestic violence over 5 years, but only $20 million was approved over 2 years by Northern Territory Cabinet. And you may not be able to comment on this yourself, Commissioner, but surely more money is needed. I think yesterday Rachel Ubergang said that the cost to the territory taxpayers is in the order of several $100 million a year. Your police resources, 60%, 65%, as you've just said, that's a staggering amount. That's costing a lot of money.
It is a very expensive response, and it's very sound to have an investment in the earlier options in childhood, about education, about health, and about policing services that are at the front end of the spectrum, rather than arresting people and people presenting in hospitals with, serious injuries.
I'm going to get to Wanding in just a moment. You're hearing from Michael Murphy, the Northern Territory Police Commissioner. I did invite a few listeners to ask you questions. Dennis in Bellomac says, can we please have more red light cameras at traffic lights? The number of motorists running red lights in Darwin is incredible, especially at the lights at Roystonia and Temple Terrace in Palmerston. It's a wonder there are not more accidents, says Dennis.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're actually good. They change behaviour. They're not so much the revenue raiser, but they actually change driver behaviour. And the National Strategic Plan is about, the vehicles, the human, how they behave and the surfaces we travel on. So it's really simple concepts. If we can change behaviour about people not running red lights, that's significant, because we see so many crashes from people running red lights, whether it's serious harm or death. Yeah. So it is good, and that's something I can take to basically the road safety group and talk to the other stakeholders there. I think it's a good investment. I don't want to be labelled a revenue raiser, those types of things, but I think those sort of things and those measures where people know things are actually control behaviour. And it's like speed cameras as well. They actually control behaviours kilometres out from where the actual camera is as well.
Only those that get pinged say, oh, it's just revenue raising, right? But if you go through at the right speed and you don't get done by the red light, you go, oh, gosh, I'm a good person today. Let's look at Wanding, which are essentially metal detectors, of course. And it's just begun this week in public places. How has it gone?
Yeah, so we had the first rollout in Katherine. There was over a period of time, there was over 120 people engaged. 3 people were detected with, weapons or things we'd class as weapons. So I'm not entirely sure. There was 1 pair of scissors in Katherine and 2. So it's about unlawfully possessing a weapon, and 2 of them were actually workers who had a lawful purpose to have them. So that no dramas at all. And that's the whole thing. It's about the identification and seizure of dangerous weapons who people don't have a lawful reason to have them. So at the moment, it's really important about the engagement and educating people about why we're there, what we're trying to achieve. Another one was undertaken in Alice Springs. There was over 30 people engaged, and 3 youth were found with scissors. Scissors were seized and the youth were dealt with under the Youth Justice Act.
Youths don't have any reason for being out with scissors, surely, unless they're an arts and crafts student.
No, and that's why they're dealt with under the Youth Justice Act. So there is that diversion or that engagement which is correcting the behaviour. And you'll see a couple of operations in Darwin over the next 24 hours in 2 locations. So,
how are you recording the data for who's being searched?
well, it's up to the ops plan. So we've got a report on it. There's an annual reporting requirement under the legislative reform that we report on who we're searching, where we're searching, demographics, what the results are. So there's pretty strict governance around it.
And to your best information, was anyone resistant to being wanted?
No one. That's probably something I might find out, but it doesn't appear so. I think everyone's pretty receptive at this time, so it's good.
Michael Murphy, the Northern Territory Police Commissioner. It's a few minutes away from 8. The Chief Minister was allegedly assaulted at Nightcliff Markets on the weekend. She has said that you and your team run her security detail. Are you able to elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, we often look at, obviously, any visiting dignitaries. We look after people's security and obviously public office holders as the Chief Minister. So if she's got any threat or risk presented to her, we'll offer or we'll provide a service to make sure that she's safe. That's different layers. It could be an overt, it could be police uniforms, it could be less overt, it could be plain clothes in public places. So we're reviewing that at the moment, and I'll get a brief probably this afternoon about what that looks like. But at this point in time, what transpired on Sunday, we'll probably be offering some services around some measures to make sure that she's looked after in public places to ensure that that type of event doesn't happen again.
Well, she has also alluded to other threats as well, which have come her way. During COVID, there were a number of threats made against Chief Minister Michael Gunner and his family. This is a worrying trend, isn't it, towards our elected leaders, whether you agree with them or not, that there are these terrible threats and, in some cases, attacks.
Yeah, and it's not isolated to the Northern Territory. We've seen political figureheads around Australia and the globe actually threatened. Some actually, sadly, we saw an international politician murdered. So we've got to take this really seriously. You know, COVID changed the world and really targeting decision makers. So it's really important that we stay on top of the information, engage with the community. And if people have any information about, people have the right to protest, but they have the right to protest peacefully. We cannot condone assaults, any type of violence, particularly to anyone in the community, but particularly towards our elected leaders as well.
Keep your hands to yourself when you
Absolutely.
protest is probably the take-home message. A text here says, Bob says, why don't the police promote the use of citizen's arrest in the Northern Territory? I reckon I know why.
It's probably not the preferred option. Like it's there, it's a last resort. It is used from time to time, and you have to hand the person over to police at the earliest opportunity, but we don't want people getting in harm's way either. So the best thing is just to stand off, report it. If it's urgent, 000. If it's not, just observe and 131 444, and we'll get there when we can.
It's very good to speak with you. Thank you so much for your
Lovely
time.
to talk to you too, Joe. Thank you.
That's Michael Murphy, the Northern Territory Police Commissioner, on ABC Radio Darwin, where it is coming up to 8 o'clock. So, breakfast team, we need a good reason to get out of town. Go somewhere great like Jabiru.
Well, we could find out how people are feeling about the referendum.
Oh, yes.
And it's been just over 2 years since Jabiru was returned to traditional owners.
Interesting.
And it's Kakadu Bird Week this week.
Oh, I'll get the keys. Join Joe Laverty and the breakfast team live from Murraywoody Arts in Jabiru from 5:30 tomorrow on ABC Radio Darwin. And the Commissioner has just reminded me tomorrow is Remembrance Day, and that's a very significant day on the calendar for community, but especially for Northern Territory Police, Fire and Emergency Services. So you'll almost certainly hear more about that across the day tomorrow. On ABC Radio Darwin, it's just about 8 o'clock. After the news on AM, transforming stormwater runoff in our cities into a valuable source of safe water. If you've seen that beautiful water just go down the drains, aghast.
A week into a youth curfew in Alice Springs, there are concerns police resources are being stretched to cover the emergency response. Questions are also being asked about the lawfulness of the restrictions, with the NT government batting away suggestions of a legal challenge.
The hardline response to Alice Springs crime extended to critics of the curfew as well.
Look, bring it on. I'm more than happy to have a legal challenge around that.
Throwing down the gauntlet as the North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency flags a potential legal challenge to the emergency declaration. Questions over lawfulness raised by representatives of the police force as well.
It's been quite clear that we think potentially that it's unlawful anyway, the curfew that they've put in place.
Correspondence obtained by the ABC shows legal advice sought by the Northern Territory Police Association found, in my opinion, the declaration is unlawful and police operating under that declaration are at risk of acting unlawfully. Concerns that have been passed on to the Police Commissioner.
We've got the Territory Emergency Management Plan. We've got some really good governance to help us function as a whole of government entity to respond to the needs of the people for Alice Springs.
Now there's growing calls from locals for the short-term fix to become a more long-term solution.
I can see the difference because I come out on my own, and I've noticed that there's not as many on the street.
Definitely a band-aid solution. It won't fix the long-term situation.
It just felt like this whole town just fell apart or something.
The government says criminal offending is down in Alice Springs and that last night there was about 60 interactions with children over the curfew. However, no arrests or charges have been laid. But the on-the-ground presence and round-the-clock policing is beginning to take its toll on the thin blue line.
It seems to be a game of cat and mouse. It seems to be a game that the young youth want to play with police, and we haven't got the police resources to play this game.
Already stretched thin, less than halfway into the response. Miles Holbrook Walk, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Good evening, Isabella Tolhurst with ABC News. Less than a week into a youth curfew in Alice Springs, and there's concerns police are being stretched thin covering the emergency response. Questions are also being asked over the lawfulness of the restrictions, with the NT government batting away suggestions of a legal challenge.
The hardline response to Alice Springs crime extended to critics of the curfew as well.
Look, bring it on. I'm more than happy to have a legal challenge around that.
Throwing down the gauntlet as the North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency flags a potential legal challenge to the emergency declaration. Questions over lawfulness raised by representatives of the police force as well.
It's been quite clear that we think potentially that it's unlawful anyway, the curfew that they've put in place.
Correspondence obtained by the ABC shows legal advice sought by the Northern Territory Police Association found, in my opinion, the declaration is unlawful and police operating under that declaration are at risk of acting unlawfully. Concerns that have been passed on to the Police Commissioner.
We've got the Territory Emergency Management Plan. We've got some really good governance to help us function as a whole of government entity to respond to the needs of the people for Alice Springs.
While people are talking about those legal challenges, I know on the ground the people in Alice Springs absolutely are overjoyed, the vast majority of people are overjoyed to have a pressure release around the curfew.
Now there's growing calls from locals for the short-term fix to become a more long-term solution.
I can see the difference because I come out on my own, and I've noticed that there's not as many on the street.
Definitely a band-aid solution. It won't fix the long-term situation.
It just felt like this whole town just fell apart or something.
The government says criminal offending is down in Alice Springs and that last night there was about 60 interactions with children over the curfew. However, no arrests or charges have been laid. But the on-the-ground presence and round-the-clock policing is beginning to take its toll on the thin blue line.
It seems to be a game of cat and mouse. It seems to be a game that the young youth want to play with police, and we haven't got the police resources to play this game.
Already stretched thin, less than halfway into the response. Miles Holbrook Walk, ABC News, Alice Springs.
After a relatively calm few nights, there's calls for the youth curfew in Alice Springs to be extended to cover the upcoming school holiday period in the town. But a growing list of organisations are now questioning the legality of the measures, with concerns the emergency declaration may not be lawful.
All quiet on the streets of Alice Springs.
So the engagement's been really positive. There were 16 conveyed by youth workers back to responsible adults. There's been no arrests at all.
On the surface, a curfew banning young people under the age of 18 from the Alice Springs CBD, reinforced by 60 additional police, appears to be achieving its ends. But in the background, there's questions over whether the extreme measures are justified in the eyes of the law.
It's a very short piece of legislation. It does seem to have been written in order to address issues that may arise from natural disasters such as cyclones or floods.
After the president of the Northern Territory Police Union advised members the curfew may be unlawful, the Chief Minister today again backed what she says was a legally sound decision.
Nathan Finn or the other organisations that are saying that they want to have a legal challenge against government, what for?
The Criminal Lawyers Association of the Northern Territory calling for the government's words to match its actions.
They've made the declaration that this is an emergency, so treat it like that. Make sure that we've got the things in place that will mean that people are safe, that it doesn't happen again, and prioritise it.
As the 2-week curfew nears its halfway point, Alice Springs residents are still in the dark about what response will be stood up when the curfew comes to an eventual end. Police say resources are stretched thin, but a short extension to the restrictions to see out the school holiday period is an option still being explored.
We know that people will adapt and overcome what measures we put in place around a curfew, but I think it's reasonable for us to start looking at what does extension look like over the remainder of the school holiday period.
Measures that for now are creating more questions than answers. Lee Robinson, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Just over a month since damning allegations of Northern Territory Police racism were raised at a coronial inquest in Alice Springs, an Aboriginal elder from the remote community of Wadare is calling for an explanation from the police's elite tactical response group as it faces investigations into racist behaviour. She's among a number of Aboriginal Territorians who have come forward to State Line NT with their own reflections of racism in the NT's force as the fallout from the inquest continues. And a warning, this story contains racist and offensive language.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
They're the NT's elite tactical policing unit, distributing justice across the territory. Now they're under investigation themselves for racism.
Just make you feel really angry or sad, yeah.
Less than 6 months ago, Wadare elder Margaret Purgett proudly wore a police uniform. Now she's condemning the organisation she briefly worked for as offensive to her people.
No, they don't trust the police at all. A lot of the police out there, it's racist.
A coronial inquest in Alice Springs in February into the shooting death of Walpuri Luritja man Kumanjai Walker aired allegations of racism, including that NT Police's Tactical Response Group, or TRG, gave out an annual award called the Nuggeta Award, which included a certificate with an Aboriginal flag and the words "Caution for a rape, that's all that needs to be said," and a trophy made from a weapon seized in Wadare.
Do you find that offensive?
Yes, it is. You know, that's not the right thing to do it. You know, giving from TRG, giving to the police as a reward, no.
In sworn statements, TRG officers have denied the Nuggeta Award was racist. One officer saying he did not ever pause for thought or consider whether they were offensive, claiming the awards were given out to recognise the nature of the job, which brings with it an immense amount of pressure. Another officer said it was awarded to the person who has displayed outstanding lack of excellence in the area of personal hygiene and feral behaviour.
They should come to Wadare and apologise to elders. They're just doing this behind elders behind the back.
Investigations into the awards have been triggered by both the NT Police and the NT's Independent Commissioner Against Corruption. The ICAC confirming he's seen enough to support the allegations, saying the evidence showed in past years awards have been issued within the TRG that are racist towards First Nations people.
Open investigation, transparent, independent investigation is going to be particularly important.
Emma King is a Darwin woman, now studying criminology in Melbourne. She isn't shocked by these claims of racism within the NT Police.
When you hear racism being affirmed as an Aboriginal person, you feel a lot of things, but you don't feel shocked. But you do feel this deep sadness I would say. It's almost like you have to grieve the hope that we had made things better.
This Central Eastern Arrender woman agrees. She says she was pulled over by the police near Alice Springs last year and believes it was primarily because of her skin colour.
I've been pulled up for no reason. I've got my bags checked for no reason. I've been rejected in places for no reason. And it's sad. It's sad and it's disheartening because at the end of the day it is discrimination and it's racist.
Territory Police Commissioner Michael Murphy says work is being done to create cultural change.
We need to change some of our settings in the police force, whether it's policy settings or our conduct. And it's going to take a lot of hard work and it's going to be a long road.
No longer a part of the force, Margaret Purgett was dismissed after allegedly refusing to help officers find and arrest one of her family members prior to Christmas.
And for myself, I got really upset and, sad for my people. It hurts me a lot because what is my hometown. I'm the senior eldest.
Ties and trust broken from a fraying thin blue line. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
Good evening, Isabella Tolhurst with ABC News. As a 2-week youth curfew continues in Alice Springs, police say more needs to be done to tackle TikTok crime in the outback town. Police say young people are playing a dangerous game and it's leading to worse crimes and risking more lives.
Careening around corners in stolen cars, baiting police into pursuits, posting and boasting about their crimes on social media.
When I always going into Insta, always see that everything. Breaking in that and everything. Like stealing cars and that, doing home invasion and that. But that's dangerous. You can easily go do big time for that.
Some call them crimfluencers, young people filming their crimes and posting them on social media in a dangerous game of one-upmanship.
It is a competition. And it's like the computer games. They feed off each other and they boast to friends.
As a 14-day youth curfew continues in Alice Springs, police say this social media crime is an ongoing serious problem.
We see a really serious escalation of the commission of crimes, which is concerning.
Local young people say these videos often pop up on their social media.
I feel bad. I feel angry. I feel angry.
They might think it's all good and all, but it's still giving us a bad name.
Experts say platforms like TikTok aren't to blame for this behaviour. Rather, it's a symptom of systemic inequality.
There's no other source of power or community for them, so they're using TikTok to express that and to engage a community.
Many teens concerned it's causing copycat behaviour.
People's older siblings and cousins are doing it and they just take the little kids along with them and they just run amok with them too,
Queensland has rolled out post and boast laws aimed at tackling this type of performative crime. New South Wales is doing the same, although it's not yet in practice. Meanwhile, the NT government says it's looking at similar legislation, but will need the big social media platforms to come on board.
Because the last thing you want to do is bring in a law that we can't actually use because we can't confirm who owns the account.
Experts say the community also has a role to play.
Don't engage with it. Don't share it even to complain about it.
A new approach needed to contemporary crimes. Charmaine Allison, ABC News, Alice Springs.
With Alice Springs halfway through its 2-week youth curfew and a rise in crime across the territory, tens of millions of dollars will be thrown at increasing police numbers in an effort to keep up with demand. NT Police will aim to recruit an extra 200 officers to the ranks, an ambitious target for a force already struggling to attract members. Our reporter Thomas Morgan explains.
In this announcement, Chief Minister Eva Lawler said the upcoming Territory budget would contain extra funding for police. This would allow the force to grow over 4 years from a target of 1,642 sworn officers to 1,842 sworn officers. Ms Lawler says that will come at a cost of $50 million per year. Now, this announcement comes amid high police attrition in recent years within the force of up to 8.5%. Speaking today, though, Commissioner Murphy said he wanted the ranks of the NT Police Force to increase its current Indigenous workforce from 13% to 30% to better reflect the broader Territory community that police serve. He said a career in police can be rewarding.
So Indigenous people, First Nations people, Torres Strait Islanders and women, please go to our website. We really want to recruit you into our ranks.
Now, this announcement comes after an NT Police Association survey from January found 75% of officers were considering leaving the force. Reacting to the government's announcement, both the opposition and the NTPA said they were sceptical they could attract people to careers in police, given the levels of attrition in the force.
This government has failed to be able to recruit police to the numbers that we need right now, let alone do an even bigger recruitment process into the future.
If we're only recruiting 200 over the next 4 years, that's obviously not even meeting our attrition rate. So is this going to be above attrition rate? And what are we doing to obviously retain our experienced members here in the Northern Territory? And instead of recruiting obviously fresh new constables, we need to retain that experience here.
Now, one thing is for certain, with long wait times for police responses across the Territory, many will be hoping more officers will make a difference on the ground.
The Northern Territory Police Commissioner has said he expects more material to emerge during an ongoing investigation into racism within the force. Commissioner Michael Murphy said it was very concerning to see a media report alleging members of NT Police shared an email in 2008 containing a photo of a board game based on racist concepts. Mr Murphy said he's referred the report to the ICAC Commissioner.
Good evening, Amy Colpert with ABC News. Serious discrimination concerns are mounting over proposed new laws giving sweeping powers to the Police Commissioner to enact curfews across the Northern Territory. The proposed bill would give the Commissioner immunity from the Territory's anti-discrimination laws, and young Territorians are speaking out.
As this Territory musician gears up for a big performance this weekend, a teenage encounter with Darwin Police more than a decade ago plays on his mind.
I just want to catch up with some mates on a weekend, and here I am getting pulled over by the police and getting dropped off to my grandmother's house.
The event left him feeling targeted and confused, and it's one of the reasons he's critical of a government proposal giving the Police Commissioner broader powers to declare public disorder situations and force people to leave public spaces.
It's a really unfair situation for the people that are doing the right things and going to school and, keeping their head on the right track.
The law's a response to what the government claims is a successful snap youth curfew over Alice Springs CBD. Police already flagging Catherine service stations and suburbs around Darwin and Alice Springs as potential future curfew zones.
We just need to step through it carefully and identify what the actual problem is, and will a curfew or a presence of police and some action there help.
The bill would explicitly trump anti-discrimination law, giving the Police Commissioner powers to target specific groups of people, for example, those under the age of 18. Despite those direct impacts, the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner says he wasn't consulted and believes the proposal is an affront to the rule of law, promoting an arbitrary use of power.
I respect the work that the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner does, and it was this government, this Labor government, that brought in the Anti-Discrimination Act.
For some young Territorians living in the shadow of Alice Springs youth curfew, more needs to change.
I don't believe that the government has done enough to support young people and youth services in the Northern Territory, and that's why we're in the situation we're in.
Hopes for a brighter future for those who'll have to live it. Lillian Rengia, ABC News.
A Darwin court has heard an explicit image of an Aboriginal woman was shared online by a senior Northern Territory police officer, along with offensive and racist language. The Northern Territory's top police officer has confirmed the incident at a special domestic violence inquest hearing in Darwin. Commissioner Michael Murphy also revealed that he withdrew disciplinary action against the officer to keep him on the force.
In June last year, NT Coroner Elizabeth Armitage launched a landmark inquiry into the deaths of 4 Aboriginal women at the hands of their partners. The investigation found a chronically underfunded family violence sector operating in crisis mode had contributed to their deaths. Today, the coroner held a special one-day inquest to hear from those responsible for tackling the crisis on what work has been done since. Instead, another instance of racism within the NT Police Force has been revealed. The Northern Territory Police Commissioner faced questions over an incident that occurred in 2022. Was one of your officers disciplined for circulating an image of an Aboriginal woman accompanying inappropriate text? Yes, he was. There was a number of officers in a social media chat platform. He's communicated a photo of a topless Aboriginal lady in a public place to that group. Commissioner Murphy said the sergeant was demoted and transferred to Katherine, but admitted he later rescinded the demotion and transferred the officer to Darwin with his former rank. Defending that decision, he told the coroner he would have gone on sick leave, we would have lost an officer. It's clear that there has been a culture of misuse of sick leave in some areas of the force. Yes, there has been. That is evidence. The revelations come just months after a separate inquest in February where former Constable Zachary Rolfe detailed claims of an entrenched culture of racism within NT Police. At the time, Commissioner Murphy said he hadn't seen any racist behaviour in Alice Springs or across the Territory.
But first, allegations of police racism have been laid bare during a long-running inquiry into the death of an Aboriginal man in Central Australia. As you'll soon hear, evidence of racist language used by police was presented at the NT Coroner's Court. Ella Archibald-Binge and Melissa McKay report. And a note, this story has the image of an Aboriginal person who's died.
It began with 3 gunshots on a November night. An attempt to arrest Kumanjay Walker in the remote community of Yundamu ended in his death. Now, almost 5 years later, an inquiry into the circumstances surrounding that fateful night has heard its final evidence.
There is so much history that comes behind those police officers walking into that house. There's so much history behind Kumanjay Walker. And I think those two histories met in that red house that night. And the coroner has the unenviable job of trying to make sense of that.
As the sun lit up Aranda country on the last day of hearings, the cousin of Kumanjay Walker steeled herself for another day at the Alice Springs courthouse.
I don't have space to process too much, because if I do, I'd be a mess. It's horrific to witness, and you know, it's quite painful, but I know that I have to take it in so that I can be able to deliver it to family.
Zachary Rolfe was acquitted of all criminal charges over the death. In 2022, a jury found he acted in self-defence when he shot the 19-year-old 3 times after being stabbed with a pair of scissors. But the coronial inquest had a broader scope, calling the former officer back to the stand in February to answer fresh questions about his past conduct.
Morning, Mr. Rolfe. How are you feeling about giving evidence today?
He was dismissed from the force last year for publishing an open letter that criticised NT Police and breached its media policy.
So Zachary Rolfe was originally called to give evidence about his own conduct as a Northern Territory police officer. He resisted that for a long time and used a lot of legal avenues to resist giving his own evidence. When it became inevitable that he would have to give evidence, he dropped a bombshell on the rest of the police force.
Zachary Rolfe told the coroner that racism was entrenched within NT Police and said an elite unit handed out an annual prize known as the Coon of the Year Award. Former ABC journalist Kate Wild is writing a book about the shooting.
A lot of people were extremely shocked. Senior police put out statutory declarations within 48 hours, distancing themselves from the awards, saying what Zachary Rolfe said they meant wasn't really what they meant. We've seen very clearly in this set of hearings that there is no doubt about how deeply racist and offensive those awards were.
The coroner heard it was here at police headquarters in Darwin where an elite unit known as the TRG gathered for its informal annual awards. The court was shown an image of one of the trophies, a club-like object seized from an Aboriginal community during a period of unrest. It was the prize for the Noogata Award. Sergeant Lee Bowens told the coroner he was runner-up for the award in 2007 for having poor hygiene.
You say it started because someone demonstrated an outstanding lack of hygiene. The name chosen for the award was a made-up Indigenous name. What was the connection in your mind between a lack of hygiene and Aboriginality?
Well, that is the link, but some Indigenous have poor hygiene.
When pressed further,
that's why the award was called the Coon of the Year Award, or the award for the most coon-like behaviour?
That was one of the terms used to describe the award.
the court was shown images of certificates presented to other winners of the award, including one depicting a minstrel show where white performers would paint their faces black to act out African American stereotypes.
Is blackface racist?
I don't know. Is it?
The award was renamed 2 years ago and has since been discontinued. Sergeant Bowens told the court he did feel remorse for taking part in them.
In essence, they were just stupid jokes, and that's the way we saw it. And we were just having a laugh at ourselves.
With the certificates, you're like, wow, people are really being so creative with how racist they're being, and they're masking it as a joke.
Yesterday, the Territory's top cop was the last of 72 witnesses to front the coroner. The court heard Commissioner Michael Murphy was told about the existence of the awards at a meeting last August, but did not investigate them.
I probably didn't treat it with the seriousness I should have. This role is quite demanding. I was quite busy.
When the awards became public in February, reporters asked the Commissioner if he knew about them prior to Zachary Rolfe's testimony.
No, I was not aware of the TRG, these awards they spoke of.
That was incorrect, that answer, wasn't it?
Yes, it was incorrect now. It wasn't intentional at the time. I just didn't draw a link to the meeting in August to the question that I was asked at the press conference.
At the same press conference, when asked about Zachary Rolfe's claims of widespread racism within the police force, the Commissioner said,
"That's his evidence. That's the events he's giving to the court in the process. When I go to Alice Springs and the other stations around the Territory, I do not see those behaviours, I do not hear those comments."
It effectively denies that there's any racism at all in the Northern Territory Police Force that you're aware of, and that was not correct. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree with that.
It's effectively gaslighting members of the Aboriginal community who've experienced racism and have complained about it when you deny that there's any racism in the Northern Territory Police Force. Do you accept that?
Yes, I do, and we've taken steps to address that.
3 years ago, the Northern Territory committed to reviewing its government agencies, including police, for systemic racism as part of a historic justice agreement with Aboriginal people.
So not just about a few bad apples, it's the whole cart that carries the apples that needs to be addressed.
Criminology Professor Chris Caneen wrote the first review of the Infrastructure and Planning Department.
There's only one that's been undertaken. We completed that in December 2022. It hasn't been released.
A review into racism within the Territory's elite police unit is underway, but it is partly being conducted by internal police investigators. A spokesperson for the NT Attorney General said the Anti-Discrimination Commission will also conduct a broader review of systemic racism within the force.
It needs to be done externally, it needs to be thorough.
As the inquiry, originally scheduled for 3 months, finally wrapped up after almost 2 years, the family of Kumanjay Walker is looking to the future.
The big picture is around safety for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's about the recognition that these institutions are inherently violent and that racism does exist, and to say otherwise is really denying our whole life's experience. We want to be able to process our healing, but that can only happen when we see the changes coming.
Crime and the state of Northern Territory Police have dominated proceedings in Parliament estimates today, with the Commissioner saying he wants the force to look to the future. It comes after an ongoing investigation into racism within parts of the NT Police and a surge in demand for 000 calls. Political reporter Thomas Morgan reports.
And you can't bring yourself to string a few sentences together. It is an important issue to every...
Tense scenes as the woman who wants to be Chief Minister takes aim at the Minister for Police.
We know that crime is worse than ever before.
Amid a 13% increase in calls to 000, Brent Potter in Estimates grilled over how police are coping with increasing demand.
But there is promising indications that the hard work that police are doing, the policy setting that we have, is seeing a decline.
He and the Commissioner answering questions on a myriad of challenges confronting the force, including a tough recruitment environment, a new IT system complicating crime statistics, and an ongoing review into racism.
I've been very clear on the public record to say that I don't believe there are systemic or cultural racism within the Northern Territory Police Force.
We don't know what we don't know, so we need to find out, and we need to create an environment where it's safe to report any behaviours that are racist, discriminatory or misogynistic in nature.
After a bruising series of revelations at a coronial inquest, time can only tell whether NT Police can improve its public image. The Police Commissioner says a key target is more Indigenous recruitment. Also revealed, an NT government buyback scheme for grocery store liquor licences saw just 4 of 51 licensees agree to sell them back. All of them in suburban Darwin and not in places like Alice Springs or Tennant Creek.
We can get rid of some of the stores in Alice Springs selling grog, but those that are addicted to alcohol will find a fix.
I think anything that we can to ensure that we're tackling the amounts of liquor licensing that exist in the Territory whilst reducing harm is really the key to what we're looking at.
With crime and alcohol policy key themes for the looming election, Labor will be hoping its big spend on policing will pay dividends. Thomas Morgan, ABC News.
A 3-night curfew in Alice Springs will come into effect tonight, prompted by violent incidents that included assaults on police. The measure will cover part of the CBD and will apply to all residents in a bid to stamp out crime.
A horror 72 hours leading to a strict 72-hour curfew. That's how NT Police described the situation in Alice Springs.
We've seen how effective curfews can be as a circuit breaker. We believe a broader curfew for Alice Springs right now will have a similar effect.
The curfew will run from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. local time and applies to both children and adults. It comes after more than 5 violent incidents over 3 nights. One involved a group of 20 youths who allegedly attacked and robbed 4 off-duty police officers. Another where a woman was stabbed.
Every individual incident is a concern for us as government. We don't want to see a single person being a victim of crime.
It's the first time the Northern Territory's Police Commissioner has used his new powers to enforce a snap lockdown after the controversial law was introduced in May. The decision coming at a crucial time.
I'm very mindful about the decision to support NAIDOC Week and not disrupt events associated with NAIDOC Week. Vitally important during this time, and it's more important than ever that we need community support.
Some in the community welcoming the news.
I think it worked, it was great, there was harmony in our town.
Definitely helped, the town and the community.
Others have been critical.
Curfew is just kicking the can down the road for a few days. What's it going to do? The core of the issue is really bad social policy.
Restrictions on alcohol consumption is now being considered too, the Chief Minister warning.
You can party, but you can't be blind drunk.
Anyone who doesn't comply with the curfew will face a penalty or be arrested. Danielle Robertson, SBS World News.
Good evening, Carl Dowling with ABC News. Police say the first night of a snap lockdown in the CBD of Alice Springs passed without incident. They spoke with about 100 people within the restricted zone but made no curfew-related arrests and praised the community for complying with directions. Questions are now being asked about the level of preparations for an influx of transient people to the town for events like the Alice Springs show and whether more could have been done to anticipate problems.
The quiet streets in the Alice Springs CBD on the first night of the curfew. For rough sleepers in town, it was another tough winter night.
When the sun go down, everybody get colds.
Hartley's in town to visit family.
This is my daughter-in-law. He married to my son.
He says the street is a better option than overcrowded houses.
When we stop in the house, people ask for money, you know. Oh, can you buy food? Can you give me money? Can you give me a loan? Too much humbug. That's what happened more bad.
Major events like the Alice Show and NAIDOC Week have brought huge numbers into town from outlying communities. The tension that comes with overcrowding was identified by the NT's police chief as one of his reasons for calling this 3-day curfew.
One of the main risks is actually here in the CBD when people congregate. We've got anywhere up to 5,000 additional people in town. A lot of them don't have places, safe places to sleep. So they're in public places, in the river, and they're here.
Local leaders want to know why this predictable spike in population wasn't planned for.
That should have been preempted. Let's be real, it's that sort of month, and you can have this influx of people from all points of the campus, crowding in, all wanting to be entertained with little or no money. Sure, there's going to be disaster somewhere.
Police say domestic violence call-outs were down last night, and that people responded well when they were told about the curfew. Whether more could have been done to prepare for the influx of visitors is a question being asked by many here today. As NAIDOC Week events continue in the town, leaders say it's important to remember there's more to Alice Springs than curfews and policing.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a lot of love going on around here, that people do like each other, people do get on with each other.
The curfew is set to end after Wednesday night. James Elton, ABC News, Alice Springs.
An 8-year-old child has been killed in a car crash near the remote community of Kalkarinji. Police investigators allege alcohol was a factor and that passengers were not wearing seatbelts. Yesterday morning, police received reports that a Toyota Prado containing 11 passengers had crashed between Kalkarinji and Lajamanu. Police say the vehicle was then driven back to Kalkarinji and met by care flight teams, where an 8-year-old passenger was declared dead. Police Commissioner Michael Murphy says there are significant impacts on communities from road deaths, which have reached 31 this year.
The amount of people dying in our roads and the life lost, it's not just the figure of 31, it's the families and community that impacts it. When we look at the death of the 8-year-old, significant families are impacted by this. It's terribly sad.
Good evening, Kyle Dowling with ABC News. The 3-day curfew in Alice Springs will not be extended, with the Northern Territory Police Commissioner saying there were no reasonable grounds for him to do so. Michael Murphy said the measures had a noticeable effect in preventing public disorder within the CBD, but after a major outbreak of violence in the town yesterday afternoon, some are questioning the effectiveness of the nighttime lockout approach.
The centre of Alice Springs lifted from lockout restrictions. After a 72-hour public disorder declaration, the authorities now satisfied the curfew achieved its goals.
The curfew played the role that it needed to.
Police confident they have the resources to assure public safety. Yesterday's chaos in the daytime, with weapons seized and 5 arrested following a major brawl in the CBD, now believed to be the result of family feuding stemming back to a fatal car crash in March.
I think they need to get over themselves, but those people need to work this out and stop bringing their troubles into Alice Springs. Abhorrent behaviour to see masses of people fighting in Alice Springs. It's not the place for it.
But just how effective the curfew was in deterring crime and violence remains up for debate.
We need that, just to keep all the young kids off the street and, to keep us old people safer.
I don't really think it's a good idea. I don't think locking people up as such and not allowing them to do things will really solve the problem.
While the NT government says it won't hesitate to call another curfew if it's required, community leaders want to see a shift in focus to help bring about positive change in the region.
Speaking to the grassroots on the ground, collaborating with community elders and working with our youths because they're the voice, because this is their future.
As the school holidays draw to a close, the NT government says a multi-agency effort is now underway to return thousands of recent visitors to Alice Springs back to their homes in remote communities. Lee Robinson, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Good evening, Kyle Dowling with ABC News. The Northern Territory's Police Commissioner has used the Garma Festival to issue an historic apology to Indigenous Territorians for past harm and injustice perpetrated by police. It's come after allegations of racism laid bare at the inquest into the fatal police shooting of Yuendamu teenager Kumanjai Walker. A warning: this report contains distressing and racist language and mentions the name of an Aboriginal person who is no longer with us.
A watershed moment after more than a century of pain. The Northern Territory Police is hoping to write a new future.
I'm deeply sorry to all Aboriginal Territorians for the past harms and the injustices caused by members of the Northern Territory Police.
An official apology for the police's role in injustices against First Nations people.
Throughout our 154 years of policing in the Northern Territory, we have aimed to work effectively with Aboriginal people and deliver just outcomes. However, we acknowledge we don't get it right and we have made mistakes.
The coronial inquest into the police shooting death of Kumanjai Walker in Yuendamu lifted the veil on more recent examples of racist attitudes among police. The image of a black Monopoly board where every square read "Go to jail" was shared between officers, and an offensive mock award known as Best Coon of the Year was presented in the force.
We need to recognise that there's been damage and hurt and pain by Aboriginal people, and the apology will do something towards healing that.
The racial scars with police run deep here in the Northern Territory, from the Coniston massacre of Aboriginal people in 1928 to the police's involvement in the stolen generations, the findings of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, and the ongoing high rates of Indigenous incarceration.
I know that I cannot change or undo the past, but as a Police Commissioner, alongside with our police officers, we can commit to not repeat mistakes and injustices of the past.
For Territory elders like Petawangi, the apology is just the start of a long healing process.
The fruit is in the pudding. We will wait and see what he does. I also must say that there is optimism in the police force going forward.
The police force is promising to make sweeping changes, with a commitment to increasing Indigenous employment and putting translators in 000 call centres. And there's a separate apology coming for the people of Yuendamu.
What we hope to do is that people don't use biases, discrimination or judgment, prejudices when they work and talk to Aboriginal people, and that they're able to diffuse situations in an appropriate way.
Acknowledging there's a long way to go, but the residual pain is burnt into history. Isabella Tolhurst, ABC News, Garma.
And if this story has raised any concerns for you or someone you know, please contact 13 Yarn or Lifeline on 13 11 14.
Well, that apology delivered by the NT Police Commissioner was followed by a powerful and rare Giri Kiri ceremony after this afternoon's bungled gathering. NITV's Michael Rennie explains.
Well, following that historic apology from the Northern Territory Police Commissioner Michael Murphy to Indigenous people here in the Northern Territory, he was led by a procession of Yolngu people over to the Youth Forum area here at the Garma Festival. And there, well, he went through what was, you can only describe as a very significant ceremony.
Just for this moment, you're going to reborn again.
It's known as Gidikili, and the Police Commissioner Michael Murphy, he took part in that, as well as other members of the NT Police Service. They actually got down on their knees around a smouldering fire, and they were required to put bark that had been prepared overnight into their mouths and bite down on that, and then they were covered in a sheet. It was just quite an extraordinary scene. Elders were talking throughout that ceremony, also chanting and singing it as well. It was very, very powerful, and I spoke to the Police Commissioner just as he got up from going through that very significant ceremony.
Nothing I've ever experienced before. It's quite a privilege to be welcomed into the Yolngu ceremony, moving forward and reconciliation and cleansing, and I think it's amazing.
One blood, okay? We are one blood.
We all are human beings.
Like many things here at the Garma Festival for 2024, the ceremony and the apology were all about moving forward, and that's the hopes here, that the NT Police Service and Northern Territory Indigenous First Nations people can move forward and have a different relationship in the future.
NITV's Michael Rennie reporting, and later NITV's John Paul Janke interviews the Prime Minister about his message to the Garma Festival.
Now back to Labor's stunning near wipeout in the Northern Territory election. New Chief Minister Leo Finocchiaro said in a victory speech crime was a huge issue in this election, and it's not just an issue there, of course.
The great people of the Northern Territory have spoken loud and clear. They want to live in a safe community where our police are supported with better laws as we address the root causes of crime.
In fact, even as Territorians were voting last weekend, Finocchiaro saw what a massive crime problem she's inherited. Over the past 4 days in Alice Springs, for instance, dozens and dozens of cars smashed up, the World Vision office vandalised, local shops broken into and robbed or simply trashed for the fun of it. But we don't just have our armed forces now giving gender awareness lessons to our allies. In the Northern Territory, the Police Commissioner, under Labor, went to the Garma Festival to apologise for what police had done to Aborigines.
It's basically recognising the injustices and the harms Northern Territory Police have been involved in the previous 154 years.
Now, when I was a boy in Darwin, the younger brother of my best friend was John Elferink, who became a police officer there and got the Northern Territory Police Service Medal. He later got into politics with the Country Liberal Party, became Attorney General, is now a lawyer. But just before this election, he sent back his Police Service Medal in protest at that apology. John Elferink joins me now. John, thanks for your time. Great to see you again. Why did you send back that medal?
Well, the reason I sent back the medal was because I was deeply irritated. I worked with a whole bunch of very fine people for over a decade and a half. And during that period, I saw those very fine people serve all people of the Northern Territory. And in that service, they often put their own lives and well-being at risk without thought for their own well-being, only to see that now being effectively trashed by a commissioner who determined to make an apology. Now, you've got to remember there's two important elements. Much of that service was actually in the defence of Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory. And you've also got to remember that many of the police officers who served at various ranks were Aboriginal people themselves. So an unqualified apology from the Commissioner of Police for all the harm done to Aboriginal people at the hands of the Northern Territory Police simply painted a really unfortunate picture. From my perspective, I just thought to myself, if you're going to commoditise the reputation of so many fine people, then the only commodity I have to respond with is the medal that you gave me for my service. But that medal represents the service of so many other good people who have placed themselves in danger in service of all people of the Northern Territory, including Aboriginal people.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, so many police have said over the last few years they feel totally unsupported politically and by the top brass. And of course, they've lost authority within Aboriginal communities as well, which is puts them in more personal danger too. How much did this crime wave, do you think, cost Labor in this election? And is that a message for politicians in other states?
I think that there's no doubt that the crime wave that has struck the whole of the Northern Territory, but Alice Springs in particular, has cost the government deeply. The new government, of course, has this challenge in front of them as well, and they have to deal with a part of the problem, which is that they have a part of their community which is completely subsidised by welfare spending in such a way that the federal government spends millions of dollars every fortnight in the Northern Territory pouring money into the pockets of essentially idle people. And then the Territory government, on the other hand, has to then spend millions of dollars cleaning up the resulting mess. Until there is a reconciliation between those particular forms of spending, this problem will be an ongoing challenge in the Northern Territory. At the moment, the Territory Government is stuck with this problem where they have to respond. When the other side of government, or the federal government, is pouring so much money into the hands of, unfortunately, so many idle people. And it's sad that many of those idle people are Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal people of the Northern Territory own half of the Northern Territory outright. One of the great tragedies in the Northern Territory is that ownership of land has not translated into jobs and wealth and created opportunities for those Aboriginal people beyond being in possession of the land. When the Aboriginal Land Rights Act was passed, the then Fraser government and Ian Viner promised it would be a wellspring of wealth. And that hasn't worked out for Aboriginal people. So welfare has tried to cover the gaps, and that passive welfare, something that was identified by Noel Pearson 20 years ago, has continued to corrode at the very heart of the Northern Territory and the Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory as well. It's very distressing.
Well, it's true, but it's massive spending. It's the reliance. It's this making a fetish of so-called Aboriginal culture. The point is, you cannot lift people out of poverty by pouring money into places where there is no work, no meaningful work, or very little, and it's money for nothing for people. Any community would go feral in those circumstances. And I don't know what the answer is, other than closing some of these remote communities and helping people transition to where there is work. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that one of my great criticisms is that with all of the assistance that we have been trying, we as a community, for all the right reasons, by the way, there's nothing wrong necessarily with the motives. But for all of that, we have effectively incentivised dependency. And that's singularly the most dangerous thing that we could possibly do, because that dependency has become manifest in an indifference to the responsibilities that people have as citizens.
Correct.
Kids should be going to school. They're not. I've seen schools in these remote communities. The teachers in the classroom, 0 kids in the classroom. Money gets poured into health clinics, roads, services, sewerage, housing, all of those sorts of things, and it's all in an effort to hope that these people will pick themselves up by their bootstraps. But there is no expectation, and in the absence of that expectation,
that's the whole thing.
Parents
John,
are dislocating.
That's a collapse of personal responsibility, and it's made worse by preaching professional victimhood and white society is terrible and you owe us. Well, what's the incentive to get off your backside? I mean, a lot of Aborigines, of course, have, but what we see in some of these communities breaks your heart, particularly the children. John Elfring, good to see you again. Thank you so much for your time.
My first duty is to recognise that I stand and join you on the lands of the Gumatj people, and I pay my deep respects to all Aboriginal people, those past, those present, and all of those that are rising. Thank you for allowing me to be on your lands and speak upon your lands. We also want to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Yothu Foundation, the member for Lingiari, my fellow police officers, distinguished guests, Aboriginal Territorians and attendees. My colleagues who stand with me are senior leaders, proud Yolnu Senior Leader, Senior Aboriginal Community Police Officer, Bettina Dangibar AM, proud Aranda woman and leader in Central Australia, Executive Director Leanne Little, Jalinda Unipingu, a proud TO and my police executive. The statements I make today are likely to make some of you feel uncomfortable or trigger strong emotions. I apologise in advance for any discomfort my words may cause, but truth-telling is critical for the Northern Territory Police to own its own part in its challenging history. Many Aboriginal have experienced this challenging history over many, many decades. By doing so, we take steps towards understanding and reconciliation and honour the journey towards healing and justice. So today, as the Police Commissioner of the Northern Territory, I unequivocally say I'm deeply sorry to all Aboriginal Territorians for the past harms and the injustices caused by members of the Northern Territory Police. Throughout our 154 years of policing in the Northern Territory, we have aimed to work effectively with Aboriginal people and deliver just outcomes. However, we acknowledge we don't get it right and we have made mistakes. As the legislative protectors of Aboriginal people and the Territory community, Northern Territory Police historically were required to defend Aboriginal people from harm. However, there were times we did not fulfil this responsibility. Instead, police saw themselves as duty-bound to protect settlers and their property when Aboriginal people resisted their incursions. I know that I cannot change or undo the past, but as the Police Commissioner, alongside with our police officers, we can commit to not repeat mistakes and injustices of the past. Northern Territory Police need to be accountable for the past treatment of Aboriginal people. The intergenerational impacts of colonisation, including poverty, ongoing disadvantage and racism, are reflected in the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people that are incarcerated. This reality underscores the urgent need for us to intensify our efforts to close the gap and address these deep-rooted causes of dispossession and disempowerment. Many Territorians, like many Australians, may not fully understand the history of colonisation across the Northern Territory. Similarly, some members of the police force may lack awareness of the profound and ongoing intergenerational impacts that this history has had on Aboriginal Territorians. As the Northern Territory's Police Commissioner and a serving officer of 27 years, and as the leader of the Northern Territory Police, I will ensure that future recruits and officers learn and understand that history so that it can be meaningfully engaged with Aboriginal Territorians and prevent further harm. I want us all to appreciate and experience the connections and friendships that can be created, that I have created, with Aboriginal people, and the continued learning that shapes my thinking, decisions, directions and leadership. I want all our officers to fully appreciate the importance and the value of community policing and being a part of that. We have a history where many of our officers have treated Aboriginal Territorians with respect, with dignity, and we continue to treasure the memories and histories we've had with Aboriginal people. However, today I'll outline some historical events that highlight the negative impact that police have played in the lives of Aboriginal people. One account concerns Tukia, who in August 1933 at Water Island in Blue Mud Bay in northeast Arnhem Land speared Constable Stuart McColl, causing his death. Fearing a massacre, the federal government decided to send a peace party headed by missionaries to bring Tukia to Darwin to stand trial. The trial was compromised, but Justice Wells sentenced Tukia to death. Sometime later, the High Court quashed Tukia's conviction and Tukia was released from jail, but he was never seen again. At the time, there was strong suspicion that Tukia was killed by McColl's fellow officers. In our commitment to truth-telling and accountability, the Northern Territory Police have an active cold case investigation into the death and disappearance of Tukia. The second event shows how Northern Territory Police were required to implement policies of the day. One example was the decades-long practice of removing children, particularly the so-called mixed race, or now racist term half-caste. Children from their families, culture and country. Regardless of the intention behind the Stolen Generations policy, there was nothing but cruel, inhumane and absolutely devastating. Not only for those who removed, but the extended family and their communities. Removals caused intergenerational trauma, loss of language, loss of cultural knowledge, loss of connection to land and water, and loss of authority structures. Those impacts play a critical role in what causes disengagement, antisocial behaviour, offending and violence today. The Northern Territory Police were instrumental in these removals and bear a shared responsibility for the resulting societal impacts, trauma and the broader harms. The final event I'll touch on arises from another policy imposed, the Northern Territory Emergency Response, also known as the intervention. In 2007, the Federal Government of the day enacted a set of legislation that required the suspension of the Racial Discrimination Act of 1975. The new laws applied to 77 remote communities across the Northern Territory. It banned alcohol, it banned its consumption, it banned gambling, banned pornography, introduced a basics card that quarantined welfare payments, abolished the Community Development Employment Program, and compulsorily acquired community assets. The intervention also increased police presence on communities to enforce those restrictions and reduce customary law and cultural practices. Some Aboriginal people appreciated the police presence in their communities, and the introduction of the basics card reduced humbugging for vulnerable people, particularly elderly and pensioners. But many other Aboriginal people viewed these measures as racist and reminiscent of the old protection era. This history and more recent events highlight two things. One, police are routinely tasked with enforcing policies, laws and regulations, both federal and here in the Northern Territory, that are often influenced by media coverage of crime, victims and community safety, regardless of data, evidence and expert advice. And at times, police officers have abused their powers or fallen short in their duty of care towards Aboriginal offenders, witnesses and importantly victims of crime. The community should never fear the police, and the police should never fear the community. So from today, we must, and it will change under my leadership as the Commissioner of the Northern Territory Police. I stand here today to publicly commit to lead that change, to transform relations between police and Aboriginal people. It will not be a reset. It will not maintain the status quo. Instead, I intend to develop a new relationship built on mutual respect, trust and human rights, where I, as the Police Commissioner, with all our police officers, will identify and do what is necessary to make every effort to eliminate racism in the Northern Territory Police and make every effort to eliminate racist behaviours when and before it occurs. I'm fully aware of the power and responsibility that comes with my role as the Police Commissioner, and I'm determined to use that authority to drive meaningful, positive change. I'm not the sole solution to these challenges, and I need support and heavy lifting to be done by each and every one of my officers and the entire community. I don't want to merely speak these words from a place of privilege and offer empty or broken promises. I ask you to walk with us to establish a new relationship. I know some of you may be thinking, we've heard these words said by so many before me, when nothing really changes, where promises are always broken. I accept for some, this response is understandable, and I know that trust must be built over time, and it must be nurtured through genuine efforts and open to criticism. I know this needs to happen at all levels within an organisation, from the front line, at the executive level, at management level, at community policing level, between individual officers and our members of the public. The trust can only grow through sustained actions, effort and tangible outcomes. I acknowledge this challenge will be hard, but any alternative is not acceptable. I have actions moving forward. One key document is the Northern Territory Aboriginal Justice Agreement, negotiated by Leanne Little as the then Director of the Aboriginal Justice Unit within the Department of Attorney General and Justice. Leanne now works within my organisation in a senior leadership role to drive and deliver the reforms required across the Northern Territory Police. Other signs of progress include efforts and actions to close the gap that demand governments to address the power imbalance in their systems, their policies, and the ways they work with Aboriginal Territorians. Because without place-based partnerships and leadership from Aboriginal people, police and other government bodies means we'll not be able to overcome any of our blind spots relating to racism, cultural safety, or unconscious bias. We will provide better services for victims, witnesses, and impacted families who are overrepresented in the justice system to help reduce crime, reduce incarceration rates, which are key measures for our work. I understand the scale of the challenges we face, and I know that the change in the culture within the agency will be tough. But this is absolutely essential for us all. We must give our very best, and that's why I'm already dedicated to rolling up my sleeves and putting in the hard work to make it happen. I need to bring everyone along on this journey. I require officers to listen, not just hear, but really listen to create the change we all need in your police and our community. We know the way forward can only be achieved in partnership with Aboriginal Territorians and community organisations. That's why I'm committed to the elimination of all forms of racism within the Northern Territory Police through an anti-racism strategy, to working and partnering with other agencies, including the Aboriginal Justice Unit and the Northern Territory Anti-Discrimination Commission, to deliver on our positive obligations to eliminate any forms of discrimination against Territorians, setting a target of 30% of Aboriginal people across all streams and ranks in police and support retention and advancement, placing Aboriginal language speakers in the Northern Territory's 000 call centre, endorsing a community policing model across the entire Northern Territory, enhanced recruit training and ongoing professional education, especially for commissioned police officers, with an emphasis on racism, history, and the importance of human rights. I'll place this apology prominently on the Northern Territory Police website and include acknowledgement of the harms, pain, and suffering that have been experienced by Aboriginal Territorians. And finally, I intend, at a respectful time and place, to deliver a separate apology to the people of Yuendamu. We need to do everything in our power to make the Northern Territory a better place. I point to the term, the Yolnu term, Nakarara. It points to the settling of differences for a better future. That's the goal. So today, I repeat my sincere formal apology as the Commissioner for the Northern Territory Police for the hurt, harm and injustices caused to Aboriginal people, and I commit alongside with all officers to do the hard work, to fundamentally reform and transform our agency and relationship with and alongside Aboriginal Territorians for a safer community. I thank you for listening.
There are mixed responses still coming in to the Police Commissioner's historic apology to Indigenous Territorians made at the Garma Festival gathering at the weekend. Echoing pushback from the police union, the opposition's withheld its support for the move.
As the dust settles on another Garma Festival in Arnhem Land, reactions to Michael Murphy's apology are rolling in.
We've been apologised to in the past with the National Sorry apology, and very limited change since then. So unless we can actually see changed behaviour, there is always going to be a bit of a suspicion around the agenda.
A group pushing for a different approach to the causes of crime, welcoming the apology as a good first step, but not without reservations.
Garma is a great festival. There are a lot of politicians and huge corporate companies and businesses that go there. So apart from the local Yolngu people, you're not actually reaching a lot of the grassroots Aboriginal people.
The police union's already pushed back and says it should have come with more warning. Today, a strong rebuke from an Alice Springs independent who called it symbolic nonsense.
The fact that they did it at the Garma Festival, which is near Nhulunbuy, almost 2,000 kilometres away from Central Australia in Alice Springs, 3 weeks before the Northern Territory general election, really makes people feel very cynical and very suspicious.
The Commissioners promised a separate apology to Yuendamu when the long-running inquest into the death of Kumanjai Walker is over. The opposition only acknowledged the apology in a statement released today, but said it was not the focus for frontline officers. The government backing the Commissioner's move.
I think good on the Police Commissioner for doing that. There has been a number of people that have called for the Police Commissioner to apologise over racism in the police force.
A number of Indigenous organisations have cautiously welcomed the Commissioner's apology at the weekend. But after a series of damaging headlines about racism allegations within the force over the last 12 months, many will be watching closely to ensure the Commissioner's rhetoric is matched with action. Thomas Morgan, ABC News.
Northern Territory Police Commissioner Michael Murphy has resigned from the Territory's police union after it criticised his apology to Indigenous people. The Commissioner underwent a ceremony of rebirth at Garma on Saturday as part of his apology, telling the community he was deeply sorry for harms and injustices caused by police officers. The Northern Territory Police Association criticised him over the apology, saying the union was not consulted.
In an exclusive statement to the ABC, former Australian Prime Minister John Howard has defended the legacy of the Northern Territory emergency response. It comes a fortnight after NT Police Commissioner Michael Murphy's historic Garma address acknowledged the harmful impacts of the so-called intervention. And a warning, this story contains distressing themes.
When public servants, army officers and police rolled into Lapalung Damarangi's Arnhem Land community 17 years ago, many of his Yolngu brothers and sisters feared another stolen generation.
Most of my countrymen took up midnight to travel by boat to other communities and remote homelands because of that.
The intervention brought compulsory bans on alcohol, gambling and pornography and abolished an employment program in 77 remote Aboriginal communities. The then Howard government also suspended the Racial Discrimination Act to introduce compulsory income management through the Basics card. 17 years on at the Garma Festival, an acknowledgement of the role police played in the intervention, with the Anti-Police Commissioner apologising for historic racism in the force.
The intervention also increased police presence on communities to enforce those restrictions and reduce customary law and cultural practices.
At the time, then Prime Minister Howard said he had no choice but to act on allegations of widespread child abuse, which have since been widely disputed. But despite that and the Police Commissioner's words, he stands by his response. The intervention was totally justified because the NT government had failed in its responsibility to Indigenous children in the Territory, despite the findings of a report that government had commissioned. The Rudd government seriously weakened the intervention. That should not have happened, and I stand by every element of my government's decision to intervene. When contacted by the ABC after the Commissioner's speech, current Prime Minister Anthony Albanese would not say whether the Commonwealth would apologise for the intervention. And after all these years, Lapalung just wants his people's voices to be heard.
We want our government to respect my countrymen. Let's work together to sustain our nation.
A call to learn from lessons of the past. Lillian Rengia, ABC News.
A group of Aboriginal police officers in the Northern Territory have lodged a racial discrimination complaint against the NT Government and Police Commissioner. Made with the Australian Human Rights Commission, they're claiming damages for more than 2 decades of racial discrimination over pay and conditions.
In this landmark legal challenge, Aboriginal police officers have detailed allegations of racial vilification against them and others in the community. Lawyers for the group say they've spoken to up to 20 Aboriginal community police officers to file the complaint.
Casual racism was meted out to officers on a daily basis. They were basically treated as a separate and second-class group of police officers within the force.
Now seeking to be compensated for those actions and for disparities in pay.
ACPOs are on paper limited to certain duties, but in practice they do a lot of the work that constables do, and yet they're not remunerated for that work.
It comes just months on from an apology by the NT Police Commissioner for past harms and injustice, along with commitments to eliminating racism within the force. In a statement, he said the complaint is a positive step for NT Police, that members have the confidence to speak up about issues such as racism. We are invested in cultural reform and continuing to make progress for a safe workplace. Meanwhile, the newly elected NT-CLP government has responded by reiterating commitments to bolstering police powers. My focus for the NT Police Force is on its future and making sure our hard-working force has the support, resources and powers it needs to keep Territorians safe. The complaint will now go through a process of conciliation. The group say if it's unsuccessful, they will seek to file a class action with the Federal Court.
An ICAC investigation into racism within the Northern Territory Police Force has handed down its report today, finding no evidence of racism beyond 2015. The investigation uncovered racist mock awards, some of which it deemed too offensive to make public, but concluded there was no use in further investigating the matter. The findings have been received with scepticism, with multiple bodies arguing racism still exists in the force today. Isabella Tolhurst reports, and a warning, this story contains some offensive content.
It began with a shocking revelation that racist awards were handed out at police staff parties between 2007 and 2015, shocking even the top cop.
I have seen the certificates. It's absolutely disgraceful and abhorrent. I won't stand for that type of culture in the Northern Territory Police.
It triggered a joint investigation by the Anti-Corruption Commission and NT Police, which unveiled more material, some of it deemed too offensive to be made public. And then the Police Commissioner's apology.
I am deeply sorry to all Aboriginal Territorians for the past harms and the injustices caused by members of the Northern Territory Police.
Today, the anti-corruption watchdog handed down its long-awaited findings. Former Justice Patricia Kelly SC writing, the investigation has brought to light historical behaviour in the NTPF, which is now acknowledged to be unacceptable, but also saying there's been no further evidence of any racist material produced after 2015. Ms Kelly made no recommendations, claiming positive change was already underway, backed by the Police Commissioner and NT Government, who said NT Police will continue to drive institutional change.
I think this ends a chapter which has caused great stress and destabilisation in our police force. Of course, it resulted in what we've always said, and that is that there is not systemic racism in our police force.
Critics claim the report invalidates the experiences of Indigenous people. In September this year, the human rights complaint was filed on behalf of Aboriginal police officers, detailing decades of racial vilification up to this year.
There is still racism in the force, systemic racism, and the suggestion that an apology by the Police Commissioner just earlier this year can somehow wipe the slate clean seems to me to be pretty questionable.
Controversial findings, which don't necessarily reflect community feelings. Isabella Tolhurst, ABC News, Darwin.
5 members of the Northern Territory Police Force, an emergency services worker and a firefighter have been recognised at the Northern Territory Administrator Awards. Anna Stephan was named Firefighter of the Year for her exceptional professionalism, compassion and dedication in the line of duty. Aboriginal Community Police Officer of the Year, Rodney Baird, was awarded for using his knowledge of cultural language and country to build trust with communities in Nhulunbuy and East Arnhem Land. The group were congratulated by NT Police Commissioner Michael Murphy, who took the opportunity to snap a selfie.
And it's just an amazing achievement and just respect. Well done, tremendous, and we'll continue to keep the Territory safe, and this is the future of leadership right here. So I look forward to spending time with you tonight, and again, congratulations.
Advocates, frontline workers, police, politicians and victims' families marched through Darwin's Casuarina shopping centre today, part of a campaign against domestic violence. It comes after an inquest confirmed this system is severely overcrowded and underfunded, with no real change on the way yet. And a warning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers, this story contains the image of people who have died.
A simple message on a complex issue. Calls for an end to domestic violence as relevant now as ever.
Alarmingly, the NT rates of domestic violence and family violence are among the highest in the nation. And they're not just statistics. They are lived realities for too many people, too many families, too many neighbours, and too many friends.
Today was an opportunity for different organisations, frontline services, advocates and the families of victims to come together. Courtney's mum was murdered by her partner. She's now speaking out about the systems that failed her.
What I'm about to talk about is not new news to you guys. You know that this is an emergency here in our country. It is a systemic failure.
In the NT, services and victims are waiting for action. $180 million promised by the government still hasn't been delivered, nor have they committed to the 35 recommendations made by the coroner after her inquest into the domestic violence deaths of 4 Aboriginal women.
We've seen the result in the past where we rush in to deliver programs that we think might work. We obviously haven't seen the result on the ground with a decrease in domestic violence, so that's why we're not rushing.
But the people gathered here would say there's no time to waste, with continued violence every day. Some say it's a matter of changing the way we speak to young men.
What the media and politicians and programs and policy portray, particularly Aboriginal boys, as being good or bad. And it's really about needing to reframe from good or bad to what's healthy, what makes you happy, what makes you sad.
But if silence is part of the issue, today they're speaking up. Isabella Tolhurst, ABC News, Darwin.
The NT Chief Minister and Police Commissioner touched down in Alice Springs today, promising action to curb violent crime in the outback town. It comes after a terrifying home invasion yesterday afternoon, which left a 2-month-old baby with a skull fracture. Charmaine Allison reports.
Brutally attacked in broad daylight.
We've got lawlessness at a level that we haven't seen before, and we've seen the result of that, a little 2-month-old, baby who can't defend itself, getting hurt.
A 35-year-old mum was at home yesterday afternoon holding her baby when 2 teenagers allegedly broke in, assaulting them both with a metal bar.
It's totally unacceptable and people need to feel safe in their homes.
The baby suffered a skull fracture and was flown to Adelaide for treatment. The Alice Springs community left shocked and shaken.
I've got a family, I've got a wife, I've got a granddaughter. We all deserve to be safe, mate.
Police arrested the offenders aged 16 and 17, both appearing in local court today, facing charges including aggravated assault.
One was on bail, one had outstanding warrants for offences, and they're well known to us.
It's the latest in a string of violent incidents in Alice Springs in recent weeks, including the alleged rape of a woman on Saturday night while she was sleeping.
Women are being targeted in big numbers.
The NT Chief Minister and Police Commissioner arriving in Alice Springs this morning, promising action.
There are a lot of very angry people in this town who feel frustrated, scared, hurt by what has taken place over recent weeks, and they deserve to be angry.
The Police Commissioner says they'll send more officers to Alice Springs, but is yet to confirm how many. He says they'll also repurpose Operation Ludlow, which is currently targeting hotspots across town with high visibility patrols, to include the suburbs as well as the CBD. But others say extra police are not the answer, and politicians need to start listening to local voices and fund community-led programs.
Giving these kids an opportunity back on country, giving them a bit of discipline, giving them a bit of pride, giving them a bit of self-worth.
An outback town crying out for change. Charmaine Allison, ABC News.
ABC reporter Charmaine Allison joins us now with more from Alice Springs. Charmaine, what are you hearing from the community following yesterday's incident?
Well, there's certainly a sense of fear and anger in the community. We spoke to Indigenous leaders, politicians and community members today, and they all agree that Alice Springs is experiencing a new level of lawlessness. Some people told us that they believe the NT government has lost control of Alice Springs and they don't feel safe in their own home, particularly women and children. Some people say they want to see a stronger police response. Others want to see the ADF flowing into Alice Springs. But still others say they believe these are just band-aid measures and more needs to be done to address the huge levels of poverty here in town and to also invest in community-led projects that actually keep kids on track. But everyone agrees that something needs to be done to reduce the levels of violent crime we're seeing here in Alice Springs.
And have we heard anything from the federal government or the NT opposition?
Yes, we've heard today from both the NT opposition and federal member for Lingiari, Marion Scrimgeour, and they both say they believe the NT government response isn't strong enough and that it comes too late. NT opposition leader Selina Yubo is calling for another curfew to be declared in Alice Springs. That would make it the third curfew called in the town this year in response to crime. Meanwhile, Ms Scrimgeour says she will support the NT government to ensure they make inroads into the troubles of this town. Now, NT Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro has welcomed this offer of support. She says she'll be in Alice Springs for the next couple of days and will be holding urgent meetings with stakeholders. She says we can expect more measures will be announced in the coming days and that anything is on the table, including a curfew. So we'll just have to wait and see what's announced in the days ahead.
Thanks, Charmaine.
It is just after 9:30. Now, we know, unfortunately, a terrible night last night on our roads. 2 female pedestrians allegedly struck in a hit-and-run incident in Brinken. Now, joining me in the studio right now is the Northern Territory Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy. Good morning to you, Commissioner.
Good morning, Katie, and lovely new digs too.
Oh, so nice and fancy in here, isn't it? Beautiful new studio. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
Now, unfortunately, starting on a very sad note, with this incident this morning, 3 women actually struck by a vehicle. 2 of those women dying. It's a terrible situation that's unfolded by the sounds of it.
No, it absolutely is. It's tragic. Tragic for the community. Our lives lost now with fatalities stands at 56. Incredibly high. We're doing everything we can to do the enforcement and education and working across other government departments to do that too, to make sure we don't see more people die on the roads. Last night we saw the 3 females struck by a vehicle. They were actually sleeping on the road. And it's the same location where we saw the fatalities previously in Brinken. So I think what they do is mistakenly take it for a car park, and they're rough sleepers, so they're sleeping on the road instead of a car park, and it looks like a vehicle has run over them. There's a couple of people assisting with inquiries, but if anyone has any information around, anything in that area last night, it was just at 1:40 a.m. Please ring us on 131 444 or 1800 333 000.
So they were asleep on that road?
They're actually asleep on the road or trying to get some rest on the road, and tragically run over. And we see the representation of pedestrians in our road, lives lost and the road fatalities way too high.
Yeah.
So it's about, really avoiding some of these situations and, getting people safer places to sleep, one. But also the contribution of the Fatal 5. Don't drink and drive, don't take drugs and drive, wear your seatbelt, don't speed, make sure your car's safe, rest, don't get distracted with your mobile phone. We see more and more prevalence of that across our younger drivers and cohorts, but just stay off your phone because just a split second of inattention can cause, injury or death.
Yeah. Commissioner, do we have any idea at this point in time whether that vehicle was stolen, or does it appear as though it's, somebody just out on the road? As I understand it, police are still now on the search for that vehicle and its occupants.
So there was some really good police work done quite quickly last night, the use of CCTV and some other technology where it identified a 40-year-old and an 18-year-old. We located a vehicle that was involved in the crash, so that's a secondary crime scene at the moment, but there's still an active investigation by the Major Crash Unit, and just urging anyone who has any information or, may observe a car with damage that didn't have damage yesterday, to give us a call. And if they've seen anything this unusual, obviously it's a strange time of the night too, to be out and about. So if anyone's seen anything, and we're obviously going through some other CCTV footage and the like, so our detectives are hard at work trying to resolve it for the sake of the family, Sue.
Yeah, right. So that 40-year-old and the 18-year-old, are they in police custody, or they are just helping police with inquiries at the moment?
We've got a 40-year-old male in custody at the moment, and an 18-year-old is not in custody but helping us with inquiries. But there's many lines of inquiry still open for us to examine.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll keep a very close eye on things, and no doubt there'll be some further information come to hand throughout the day.
Yeah.
Now, Commissioner, as I understand it, a little bit earlier in the week, another recruit squad graduation for the Northern Territory Police. How many recruits graduated?
Yeah, so it was a swearing-in ceremony.
Okay, yeah.
So they'll graduate next year. We do have a couple of graduations. Our recruitment stream's going extremely well. It's great to see so many people want to join the Northern Territory Police. We had 30 officers sworn in yesterday, which is really inspiring. We had 4 previous officers rejoin the ranks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Come
we're seeing
back.
that. And we're seeing that more often. People are writing to me, even of last week, wanted to come back and join the force.
How many?
So it's really nice.
4 yesterday?
Yeah, have rejoined Northern Territory.
From where did they go?
Just other jobs somewhere else, and and did something different, and came back and realised they missed policing. And I think the call to action and come and join the police force, and it's inspiring to see a really good police force doing incredible work. It's a really exciting time for the Northern Territory Police to come and join to make a difference to keep your community safe. So. We're really aggressively recruiting Territorians. There was 14 Territorians out of the 30, which is amazing, and really diverse skill sets from defence and consultants. And it's really nice to see 19 to 59 too, so the age parameter, a really diverse group, and they want to join and make a difference, and it's really inspiring.
And Commissioner, one of them was actually your son.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
How
what
cool.
a proud dad moment.
What a proud dad moment.
Yeah, and gave him a big hug. So it's really lovely.
I think this is a really nice thing on a few levels. Like, obviously a really great thing, to have a young Territorian joining the police force, and you must be so proud as a dad. But it also sort of says to me that you, as the Northern Territory Police Commissioner, and also, it says that it's a force that that you feel comfortable enough for your son to join, and it's something that you want your son to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really exciting time for the Northern Territory Police. Like, we've transformed it significantly even in the last couple of years, and we've got a lot of work to do. But, I've got a mandate to make sure I look after our officers, make sure they're supported. New government, the Chief Minister and the Police Minister's made that really clear. She supports police. That's amazingly clear. And she communicated that yesterday to the new squad too. So we're in a really exciting time, a clear mandate to reduce crime, and we're doing that really well. Working incredibly hard still. Crime is still too high, and the rates of domestic violence, obviously the road toll as well, youth crime. So all the new laws, a suite of laws that have been introduced across many bills and acts are going to help transform how we do policing activity as well, and to reduce crime and keep the territory safe.
Well, and look, some of those new law changes coming into effect, obviously, really sort of this week and last week. What work has to happen to ensure that officers, know exactly what they need to do in some of these instances with these law changes, i.e., yesterday we saw the first posting and boasting charges laid?
Yeah, so we move pretty fast in the police force to educate our 1,600 officers about law changes, and in advance we've got online training packages, we do emails, we walk the floors as well. Like, I've been in Alice Springs last week telling about the changes, so we see, new laws about ram raids, damaged property, like people who are leaving premises and ramming through gates, or use a vehicle to ram into a premise to steal property, or ram police cars. So all that legislation will add to general deterrence and put people before the court so they can answer for their poor choices and conduct. Posting and boasting, we've actually seen 2 charges laid down on the posting and boasting. So on the weekend, we saw a 19-year-old male involved in a violent assault, and he glorified his acts from the crime scene on that conduct.
Yep.
So he's been charged with the posting and boasting, and we've seen a 13-year-old also arrested and charged around posting and boasting after he broke into a premises in Milner and then posted some of the stolen property, including a samurai sword. So
it's appalling, and it's quite unbelievable, I think, for an everyday punter like myself, where you think to yourself, someone's broken the law, they're then sharing it on social media, and you know, previously it seemed as though they're sharing it on social media and not getting away with the crime. Well, we know the police are actually capturing them. We know that the police are doing the hard work to get them, but sharing it on social media is like rubbing it in the victims' faces.
Yeah, look, the advent of social media since 2004 has caused enormous social issues, societal problems and, you know, criminogenic problems as well. So, you know, there's been many conversations from a law enforcement perspective about the social media platforms and the harm they contribute and how fast they can act to deter and stop some of the harmful content being broadcast on social media, and it's shared. So it is harmful to the community because it adds to that fear of crime as well. So, but the main thing is the people who are committing the crime and thinking it's okay to glorify it and post it about their poor choices need to have accountability attached to them and consequences.
And also, though, like, you just kind of think to yourself, if they're glorifying it and they're making other younger ones or other people think that it's a cool thing to do, it's like, no, it's actually not. And if you're doing it and then you're sharing it, well, you're now going to cop a harsher punishment. Do you think that we're going to see any kind of minimisation in that behaviour as a result of this law change, or do you hope that we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there'll always be like an action for like an outcome or an action attached to, you know, general deterrence and consequence.
Yep.
What we need to do is also engage in the education system and do those programs. But more importantly, some of the kids who aren't going to school, and I've been talking with the CEO of Education as well about how we can better engage kids in their re-engagement strategy to get them to school so they actually have purpose, don't make poor choices, don't commit crime, don't end up in the youth justice system, and they can actually get an education and a job later in life.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You know, education is the key for so many young people. Hey, in relation to some of the other changes like the ram raid offence, but also the stronger laws, really, if somebody assaults a police officer, like the level of assault that we've seen towards our Northern Territory Police in recent times is quite astronomical. Even yesterday we caught up with one of your police officers, Senior Sergeant Dale Motta Barnard, and spoke more about the work that Trident's doing, but had a situation just last week where there's vehicles trying to ram police cars.
Yep.
It's horrible behaviour. Do you think that we're actually going to see a change or a potential minimising of the level of this violence towards police as a result of these law changes?
I definitely hope so. I think we will see when we're holding people to a higher account, there has to be an impact. It's totally unacceptable that people think it's okay to target police officers. Ramming them in a vehicle, which can cause death, is totally unacceptable. We're looking at different resolution strategies to make sure we stop that behaviour faster. I mean, to go on a 75-kilometre pursuit and trying to ram police cars is incredibly dangerous, not just for the occupants of the stolen cars, but our officers who are working incredibly hard.
Yep.
You know, I commend Trident, I commend Viper and Alice Springs and all our officers across the territory who do incredibly hard work.
Yep.
It's totally unacceptable that our officers are assaulted. You know, we see people getting spat at, our officers getting spat at. It's too common. We had an officer punched a female officer in Peel Street on Saturday night.
You're joking.
Doing her job. You know, it was... It's just, you know, luckily we're not seeing...
It's disgusting behaviour.
Yeah, it is disgusting. We had an officer assaulted yesterday on Nightcliff Foreshore. He was hit in the head. He required stitches.
What?
I
What
spoke to him
happened there?
last night. So just engaged with a group of drinkers. They got quite agitated and they was engaged, and they actually turned on the officers and basically assaulted them. The public actually came to assistance as well, and, you know, police reinforcements came in and made 2 arrests. But
wow. So that
just
was
that type
last
of
night?
assaults, yesterday evening. So
In
just
Nightcliff?
So it's really, you know, we can't see people assault the people who are enforcing the law. I mean, people do make poor choices, and a lot of people are affected by drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
And they're just not in a state to make a good choice. But
Well, and it doesn't give you a right to go and punch someone or hit someone across the head. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. We've got to respect each other as humans.
Yeah, it's
especially when you're doing your job.
Fundamental, respect is key to societal positive behaviour. And to spit on someone is absolutely disgraceful as well.
Absolutely. So you mentioned then that you spoke to the officer last night who was assaulted. Is that officer okay?
Yeah, he's had stitches to his head. He's going to be a bit sore, but he's really positive.
Yep.
He's probably impacted, of course, that he's been assaulted and injured. Those, sadly, people relive that too, going through, if I'd done something differently, it could have been a different outcome. And that's, you can't just second guess when you're doing your job. And you get assaulted as a result of it. So, we wish him all the best and a speedy recovery, great officers, and, we just don't want to see police get assaulted.
Any arrests as a result of that incident last night?
Two arrests were made pretty swiftly when other attending police turned up.
And no doubt charges, and I guess it'll be interesting to see then what happens with these law changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that is going to be the case now, is that a lot of us are going to be keeping a much closer eye on the courts to see just how some of these law changes then do sort of flow through once cases go through the courts.
Yeah, the bail laws will come into effect. I think they're scheduled. So everything's ascended to except the bail laws, so Declan's law, with serious violence offences, that if you commit one of those or you're on bail for one of those offences, then the presumption will be against.
Yep.
That's sort of scheduled for January, so there's a lot of operational and technical things that need to get in shape before that, and plus that will put additional pressure on the correction system. So, that is all, there's movements in there, there's infrastructure getting planned because that will have an impact on the justice system and then accordingly the correctional system as well.
And of course the watch house is still being used at this point in time by corrections.
Yeah, we've got they've still got the Darwin watch house. We're working together. Obviously we have to work together to house the prisoners that we're delivering to corrections.
Yep.
I think there's still 50 prisoners in the Darwin facility. Corrections did a whole body of work to alleviate pressure on our watch houses over the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
Catherine's pretty good. That's pressure's been released. Alice Springs has a minimal number, but it sort of fluctuates in Palmerston between about 60 and 80 per day.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll keep an eye on things, and no doubt as Declan's law does sort of pass through and comes into operation as well, we'll certainly catch up with you when that happens. Northern Territory Police Commissioner Michael Murphy, really appreciate you joining us this morning on the show.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, Katie. Have a nice day.
You too.
Rolling lockdowns, 16-hour workdays and a handful of officers guarding hundreds of prisoners. This is the grim reality for prison officers in the Northern Territory. But with the government's new bail laws about to take effect, which could lead to even more people sentenced to prison time, the crisis is only expected to deepen in 2025.
This week in Alice Springs Prison, they've been rolling lockdowns and just a few overworked officers.
We have had 2 or 3 officers dealing with 700 prisoners.
Amid a surge in prisoner numbers, the union representing around 500 staff in the NT prison system say their members are at breaking point.
The tensions between officers and management are rising, and it's rising rapidly. They're exhausted. They're working 16-hour shifts. There is an expectation that these officers need to come in early before their shift and to stay back.
The Police Commissioner expecting that pressure on the system to mount amid a surge in domestic violence call-outs and arrests over the new year.
We look at up to 100 calls a day. Tomorrow will increase probably, I think it's about up to 20%. It's people who are at home together, spending a lot more time together, drinking a lot more, family visiting and tensions fray.
It comes a week before the rollout of Declan's law, the centrepiece of the government's winning election pitch. The Attorney-General today declaring the government will push even harder if the tweaks to bail laws don't result in more jail sentences.
If those details emerge that it's not working and our community are still not safe and those numbers continue to soar, then we will ensure that we do everything that we can so that our community is safe.
There were 21 alleged breaches of bail heard in the NT courts today, cases which weren't judged under the NT's new laws. But the government anticipates that from next week, a breach of bail charge will more likely result in a jail term, and that'll be after a busy 24 hours for police.
Historically, we've seen up to 50 arrests every New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, so we're preparing for that, but we hope that's not the reality.
A crisis expected to worsen before it improves. Oliver Chaseling, ABC News.
The Northern Territory's booming prison population has reached a new record and grown by more than 470 prisoners since the Country Liberal Party assumed government in August. The ongoing crisis is taking a toll on police officers, as well as inmates inside overcrowded prisons and police watchhouses.
A crisis with no clear end.
We've got just over 400 more people in prison since the CLP came to power in August than previously under Labor. And that really reflects how many people should have been behind bars that weren't.
In a statement, the Department of Corrections confirmed the Northern Territory's adult prison population has reached a new high of 2,658. With each prisoner costing about $330 per day, the Territory's daily incarceration bill is now nearly $880,000. Behind the numbers, prison staff and inmates enduring dangerous conditions.
There's limited room for showering, limited room for exercise in that facility. So potentially they're locked up in a cell for sometimes the 24 hours out of the 24-hour period.
The ABC understands police watchhouses have become so overcrowded that prisoners are sleeping on mattresses on the floor in filthy cells for weeks at a time, often in stifling hot conditions. They can only take a shower every 4 or 5 days and have no choice but to use the toilet in front of up to 15 other inmates. The crisis affecting police.
They've been instructed that non-urgent arrests are to be avoided if possible, to alleviate the pressures we're currently seeing in our watchhouses. That's an instruction by NT Police.
The Northern Territory's Police Commissioner denied any such directive, but conceded there is a problem.
It's a low level offending. They would probably pursue another course of avenue as either an infringement notice or a notice to appear or a summons, and because every police officer across the Territory knows the pressures are under in the watchhouse.
The NT government says it's working on a solution.
We're well on track to make sure we've got 200 prisoners in the Berrima facility by March. Work is underway in Alice Springs to finalise the 96 new beds there.
A corrections crisis plan sorely needed. Samantha Dick, ABC News.
Well, the last week has seen the Chief Minister and Police Commissioner fly down late last week. They announced, of course, changes to Operation Ludlow, also a fugitive task force, which will have 12 new officers added to it to deal with outstanding warrants. And, of course, a lot of you are feeling pretty anxious as we roll into summer. It's been a really hard few months in the town of Alice Springs. Now, yesterday, Police Commissioner Michael Murphy went down to the mall, had coffee with a cop. You might have gone along to air your concerns and question police. And we're having breakfast with the Commissioner right now. Michael Murphy, good morning.
Good morning, Stuart. Good morning, Alice Springs.
I get the impression a lot of concern raised yesterday in the mall.
Yeah, it was well attended and really good discussions with the Alice Springs residents who were quite frank and honest in how they feel.
People are worried.
Yeah, absolutely. I was concerned about the level of anxiousness and I guess the fear. But, you know, we've got a lot of operations ongoing at the moment with policing at the front of it. You've touched on Operation Ludlow, which has got 28 police assigned to it.
So that's extra, that's above standard policing numbers here?
There's 6 Alice Springs police attached to that, and there's 22 additional from Darwin, which includes TRG. And then we've got the Fugitive Task Force, which is actually 17 additional detectives. There's 2 local Alice Springs detectives, and then we've got 5 from Operation Trident from Darwin, and we've got 10 detectives from drug and organised crime focusing on baileys, paroles and high harm offenders. And they've arrested over 20 people already since Thursday.
Okay, so the fugitive operation is underway right now.
It absolutely is.
Someone said to me, but isn't that just standard police work? Shouldn't we be doing that sort of work all the time? Or is it just an admission we don't have the resources to do that kind of work normally?
Look, there's a number of things. I think this is the platform for what policing is going to look like in the future. We need to be proactive. We need to target high harm offenders. The sad reality is we're setting new records in the correction system every single week. We've got over 140 prisoners in our police watchhouses because the jail's at capacity. We continue to do our job. We've locked up it's close to 140 people in Operation Ludlow since the 14th of November. Our officers, a credit to them, are working incredibly hard, and the Ludlow and the fugitive strike force. And we've got the road policing Christmas campaign underway at the moment too. We've got 8 officers solely focusing on RBTs. And I joined them yesterday morning. They've done over 1,000 breath tests already in a number of days. We've got 58 lives lost on the roads, and I don't want to see another life lost in the Christmas and festive period over the Territory or Territorians travelling.
The question a lot of people will be asking is, you've talked about some very high and intensive resources which are on hand right now. How long will those resources be in Alice Springs? I asked Martin Dole that. He didn't really give me a firm answer. So we will see between the Christmas period and the first 2 weeks of January, that's when a lot of people are away, and we know, and I can tell you from experience, those weeks are pretty tough in town. Are those resources going to be staying in Alice Springs for at least till the middle of January, if not beyond?
We're planning for the 28th of January at this point in time.
With all these resources on
all
hand?
These resources maintained. I had a really good meeting with the Mayor, Mr. Matt Patterson, yesterday. I've given him an assurance that those resources will remain focused on Alice Springs and the safety of residents, and reassuring that we've seen some really good positive results. In 7 days with Ludlow, but with the fugitive task force as well. Getting a briefing yesterday, we've seen a downward trend already of all types of crimes. So we need to sustain that effort, and we'll continue to plan. The team review this daily and weekly about what it looks like, what operations look like, and being flexible around, the fugitive task force has got 17 police officers assigned to it. They're achieving some really good results, but at the end of the day, they will transition into uniform and support Ludlow. The sectorisation of Alice Springs, and with a clear focus, has had really good results. I've asked officers just to knock on people's doors and check in on them to make sure they're okay. A
number of people are asking the question about Ludlow. I mean, are the police constantly patrolling in Ludlow? Jill has asked this question, but a few others have said. Or are they stationed in a certain part of a locality, if you're north side, the rural area? Because she's saying, I don't go at night, but are they constantly patrolling through the streets, or are they sort of staging in a certain area?
No, we're mobile, so there's, the command is obviously controlling the resources, but we've got 5 sectors. They're mobile in marked police vehicles, they're in ATVs. We're breaking through. The Chief Minister's actually had some really productive conversations with her federal ministers about breaking through the CASA restrictions on our drones, so we can get drones up and support operations. I've asked the team to explore, and it's been productive, for getting a helicopter. So the Bushfires NT have a helicopter on the ground here. We're going to have that available to us for 3 hours every day.
Okay. So what time of the day?
That'll be up to operations. That'll be in demand periods, and get up and, observe. We've seen the mobility with the ADVs and our police officers has been really extraordinary. So actually being mobile in each of the urban areas or the suburbs, they're disrupting people. So they'll see kids and they'll run away into the bushland. And that's where we need that drone capability to actually observe them.
Look, a lot of questions coming through to us, Commissioner. Chris in Breitling says, hi, Brashy, I was broken into twice in 2 weeks. We had clear footage of the offenders, or the offender had an ankle bracelet. He left fingerprints. He's still at large, even though he was on a suspended sentence. I've been told it takes 3 to 6 months to get fingerprints identified and processed. Is that the case, 3 to 6 months?
No. So the property crime offending is actually a priority for us. I'll take that on notice and chase it up, but we prioritise. We've got a good forensics unit here in Alice Springs. They get some really good results. The priority is just making sure we identify offenders so they don't repeat offend. That's really important for us.
Sue just says, good morning. If the jail and watch house are at capacity, why then are people getting bail when they should really be getting locked up, says Sue? Because we had confirmation, the Australian published the rap sheet of these 2 young men who allegedly involved in the home invasion in Larapinta last week. They had a very long rap sheet. At least one of them was out in bail. So are we doing enough to keep offenders off the street?
One was on bail, one had warrants. They're both remanded until February.
Okay, I know they are now, but should they have been on the streets in the first place?
Well, I think what we'll see is the change of the bail laws, which is looking at coming into place at the 28th of January. That will give us stronger provisions to represent refusal of bail, a presumption against bail, to the courts. Ultimately, it's a decision for the judges and the the Justice Administration to make a decision in relation to bail.
Because even the changes they've made is a presumption against bail. That still means a judge can choose to give bail. That's a presumption against bail in certain circumstances. So people can still get out and bail, depending on the judge's their decision.
The judges always have discretion in relation to bail. What there are will be tighter measures around electronic monitoring, and then obviously maybe a physical location to reside at that will bail check. And that's exactly what the Fugitive Task Force is doing. It's making sure people are complying with bail. And what we've got to do is flip it. And when we say, you asked the question earlier, should this be what policing looks like? It absolutely should. We're living in a really reactive environment where our police are working really hard. Ludlow and the Fugitive Task Force are complementing our 4 or 5 response patrols, responding to public calls for assistance, and it's making a difference. We can see it in the data already in a week.
Barbara just said, good morning, Commissioner. Do you have the authority to limit over-the-bar sales before takeaway sales begin? Christmas greetings. And that's the thing. We know that on-premises drinking does see issues. There's a recommendation from the coroner to put the BDR into pubs and clubs. Do you support that move? That we should trial that for at least 12 months to put the BDR into those pubs and clubs?
So it's quite complex, and the 35 recommendations are being considered by government at the moment. We support anything to reduce violence against vulnerable people and reduce the counts of domestic violence we see in the community. We've yesterday in the briefings, I've actually asked the Chief Minister and Cabinet Office to write to the licensing and actually see if we can get consent to how we better manage the sale of alcohol on premise. Whilst on premise consumption is supposed to be safer because they've got responsible service, it's when they leave the premises and go into public spaces and they're vulnerable, we see violence. So we're asking them to be curious and ask people if they're on the BDR and look at measurements in place to control the sale of alcohol.
You think it would be too hard to put the BDR into pubs and clubs?
Well, it's a hard one. So how do you monitor that? How do you scan people coming into premises?
Scan them en masse when they walk in. If there's a shout involved, make sure that you know that there's a person in that shout. I don't know, but there must be a way.
There's facial recognition. There's all types of things. You've got hotels with multiple points of entry. It's a requirement in clubs to sign in. What that looks like in membership or non-membership based. It's an added cost to hoteliers and the like, but there's probably a better way, but it needs to be by consent and probably a bit of a collective wisdom to solve the problem of harm associated with alcohol.
I just want to play you a bit of audio now. Former Deputy Mayor of Alice Springs, Murray Stewart, he's vision impaired, he suffers a range of infirmities. He has taken, and he's said this to the ABC, he's taken to arming himself with capsicum spray and a taser. This is him talking to the ABC.
I hope I never, ever have to use this. I do. But as I said, I'd rather have a day in court than to be dead. I know with my medical conditions that if I am hit in a violent fashion, it is likely that I would pass away. So I have just simply had to resort to an action which I never ever thought I would have to.
Murray Stewart says he'd rather be in court than dead. He's armed himself with a taser and the capsicum spray. What's your response to that? Because he's scared, like so many vulnerable people in our town are scared.
Look, we've got some really high-level policing activity happening to keep, and let me reassure the citizens of Alice Springs that we've got this and we'll keep you safe. We're going to make a difference. Our officers are absolutely committed to making a difference.
But he's not convinced, and that's why he's done this. What's your response to him arming himself like that?
Don't arm yourself with prohibited weapons. God forbid they're used against him or they're taken from him in a theft and used against other citizens. That's why they're prohibited weapons. They're usually in the hands of law enforcement officers, not for normal people. It's dangerous to have those weapons, because what we will see if he escalates a situation, if a person comes onto the premises, what level of violence might they use against him as well? So please use caution.
He's
Don't arm yourself.
He is scared. So what should people do?
He's not alone. The best thing I can say is you do have, specific conduct to defend yourself. Don't arm yourselves with prohibited weapons. Take shelter in a safe room and ring police, ring 000, and we'll respond. We're responding with the Ludlow, we're responding within minutes to calls for assistance. So we're trying to disrupt this behaviour so people absolutely feel safe in their homes. We can't have people in Alice Springs, a beautiful town, that needs to be thriving. Would
he be facing court? Would he be charged with anything for owning those weapons?
So he's not been charged with anything. He made admissions on the radio. He's got good standing, a former deputy mayor. Our police officers went and visited him yesterday and had a discussion with him and used discretion about saying you can't have these.
Were those things removed from him?
I believe so, yes. Well, he can't possess them. They're unlawful.
Yeah, but there's lots of people in this town who are probably in the same position. And we do see in the last few months, older people, single women, mums, vulnerable people being targeted. They don't feel safe, and that's why they're taking this action people just want to change. And Sue also texted in saying, what's the end game? What is the end game? We can do all this policing, but what is the end game?
Yeah, so policing can provide immediate respite. Like, we have the ability and the power to make a difference straight away, and we've proven that. What we're seeing too is support from all the other government agencies in Alice Springs, and we're seeing education officers who are usually on leave this time of year.
That's a good question, because last year the then government said, all the NGOs, all the services will still be in place over Christmas. That didn't happen. Yeah. Is it going to be the same this year?
Well, it's happening now.
It's different?
Visiting with the Chief Minister last week, it was made abundantly clear that everyone's got their shoulder to the wheel. There's activities happening. There's education officers in Yaparenya and Alice Plaza and the mall redirecting kids to activities, so they've got something to do. We've got the public housing safety officers visiting housing density and making sure that we see problems with overcrowded housing and that people can get back to communities when they need to.
One listener said just then, lots of us are armed. You can't count on the police. But that is the sentiment which is out there.
You can count on us. Have faith, please. I know it's a really difficult time and people are hurting, and I saw it in their eyes yesterday.
Another question, where's the 000 Centre for Alice Springs? That was promised by the new government. Where is it?
Yeah, we're working on it. So we're working on flexible arrangements. The best, fit for purpose call centre is in Darwin. We've got all the resources as CTV, but we're looking at...
But the new government promised us a 000 down here.
And we're looking at some flexible options to put people into Alice Springs to answer some calls.
What is the threshold? Now, we know from speaking to Martin Dole that he's reached out to Reece Kershaw from the AFP. We know other police have reached out to SA Pol. What is the threshold which will spark a call to those other services for police assistance? Because it sounds like groundwork's been done already.
I've already made the calls to a fellow commissioner in South Australia, Mr. Grant Stevens. We're discussing that for planning, if required, for January to support. So those calls are being placed. I can,
Have you discussed thresholds for when that you might make the call on their resources?
Well, it's about, I'm really dependent on the command team here to say we're exhausted, our resources are stretched, we need some support. I'm really mindful that it's Christmas, but there's a lot of people making sacrifices, a lot of people in the police force making sacrifices to be here and protect the people of Alice Springs.
Listeners are even saying, and I know it's not an issue for you as police, it's for corrections, they're saying, can we send prisoners into state to free up space here?
Yeah, that's been explored, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the Corrections Commissioner, but usually it has to be by consent. So the prisoners, and they don't really want to go interstate, but that's an option that can be explored.
Can I just investigate something finally? The Australian has reported this week that the chair of Luratepa Corporation, which represents native title holders, was handed a 6-month suspended sentence in June after pleading guilty to aggravated assault following a violent incident in which he struck his partner with a digging stick. Now, police work with Luratepa on community patrolling. Did you meet with the chair of Luratepa the other day when the Chief Minister was here?
No, I left just before midday, so the Chief met. I didn't meet with them at all.
You and your police meet with Luratepa all the time because they provide community patrols. How concerned are you that the chair of Luratepa has this DV against his name?
Well, what I can say, I don't condone any form of domestic violence. It's actually a basic endemic in our community. We're overrepresented in so many ways with domestic violence. We've seen, the inquest into 4 women who were murdered. We've got another 8 inquests coming up next year before the coroner. We need leaders to stand up against the violence against women, and this is a men's issue. So it's about men taking the lead to say this is totally unacceptable.
But will senior police, if in conversation, will they choose not to meet with someone who is a DV perpetrator, who's the chair of the native title holder group in this town?
No, we won't refuse to meet with anyone. We rely on Luratepa and their leadership to make sure there's...
Should they make a change?
Well, that's up to them, Stuart, but, I can't condone any form of domestic violence. He's faced the justice system. Now it's about him, making choices and making change and speaking about what he's done, I guess, to make change to the community.
Michael Murphy, thank you for coming in. Will you stay much longer in town?
No, I'll be leaving this morning, but I'll be back again soon.
Mike Murphy, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
The Northern Territory's Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy, has outed himself as the subject of an anti-corruption probe. The Independent Commissioner Against Corruption published a report late last month making findings against an unnamed senior public officer. The report stated that senior officer had engaged in improper conduct and had mismanaged a conflict of interest. Olivana Lathouris joins us live from outside Parliament House. Ollie, what's led to this bombshell admission?
Well, Kyle, there's been plenty of speculation simmering over the last few days, and as you mentioned, that really began when the ICAC published a report which found that a senior executive had helped a good friend get a high-powered job in the public service. Now, we now know that appointment to be the Assistant Commissioner, Peter Kennan, a close and long-term friend of the Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy. Now, the ABC isn't suggesting any wrongdoing on behalf of Mr Kennan. However, the ICAC did find that Mr Murphy's conduct was negligent, incompetent and improper in relation to that hiring process. Now, up until now, Mr Murphy has remained anonymous due to some constraints under Northern Territory legislation. Despite that, though, he has come forward. In his statement, he said it's his job to ensure trust in the Northern Territory Police Force, and also accepted that he should have handled that conflict of interest better. He did, however, defend that appointment of Mr Kennan. He said it was based on merit and that it's just one of many appointments he's been involved in during his time as the Police Commissioner.
And so, Ollie, what happens now then?
Well, Kyle, that really remains to be seen. The Northern Territory Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, has been under significant pressure this week to reveal what she knew about that ICAC investigation. She didn't reveal Mr Murphy's identity. However, she has indicated that there won't be any disciplinary action taken. The Northern Territory Police Association has called an urgent meeting tonight, and we are expecting a statement from them a little later on tonight or tomorrow. Kyle?
Thanks, Ollie.
It came in a late Saturday night media release from the Chief Minister. The Territory's top cop will be stood down effective immediately.
Yesterday, I spoke with Police Commissioner Michael Murphy and informed him that his position was untenable and that he did not have the support of the government.
An ICAC report released 9 days ago finding a senior public executive, now known to be Mr Murphy, was negligent and incompetent when he appointed his close friend to the role of Assistant Commissioner last year.
I've not asked for Commissioner Murphy's resignation. I've given him the opportunity to resign, which he has not taken up.
The Chief Minister was first made aware of the ICAC's findings over a week ago, but Mr Murphy was not named, sparking fierce questioning from the media today.
Well, you're the minister responsible.
That's exactly
for the
right.
So
and as Chief Minister, I cannot be breaking the law.
Independent MLA Justine Davis also asking why he wasn't named.
She said she had advice from the Solicitor General that reinforced that. So I'd really love to see that advice, because I think we can't be holding questions about these things. We need, as a community, to know that we can trust what our Chief Minister or what our ICAC Commissioners are saying.
Well, I met with the Solicitor General and he confirmed the advice provided to me by the ICAC Commissioner, which was that I could not say anything.
Michael Murphy is the second Police Commissioner to make an early exit in 2 years. In line with his contract, he'll receive 6 months' pay following his termination. But the circumstances of his departure mean the ICAC is now in the government's crosshairs.
There needs to be reform to the ICAC, so that's on the table for this year. But then there are other areas that may very well need to be looked at as well, including how we appoint statutory officers.
A Territory cop since 1997, Michael Murphy served as Commissioner for 2 years, overseeing the first youth curfew in Alice Springs and attracting criticism for his handling of police racism brought up during the coronial inquest into the death of Kumanjai Walker. But he'll be best remembered for his apology to Indigenous Territorians for past harms and injustices caused by members of the police force.
I'm deeply sorry to all Aboriginal Territorians.
As he steps out of the limelight, Deputy Commissioner Martin Doll will take his place.